The International Monetary Fund is calling on the Eurozone to let Greece skip paying interest on bailout loans until 2040. Now, according to the Wall Street Journal, the proposal includes fixing the interest rate at 1.5% for the next 30 to 40 years. The latest proposal from the IMF goes well beyond what Eurozone members have been willing to offer Greece. The IMF says it can't join Greece's third bailout until the finance ministers agree on restructuring its Greek loans. Kyriakos Mitsotakis is the Greek opposition leader and from the centre-right New Democracy Party, and he joins us in the studio today. And also with me is our business editor, Delano D'Souza. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Firstly, the Greek Parliament recently pushed through some tough pension reforms in order to secure a fresh tranche of its bailout. Do you think the country is sort of finally getting its house in order?
As you're right to point out that the government has managed, after prolonged negotiations, to reach an agreement with our creditors, which also includes some tough reforms. The real question is whether the fiscal mix that is proposed by the government is the right approach for the country. And we have profound disagreements with the policy mix that is proposed by Mr. Tsipras, for the simple reason that it relies almost exclusively on taxation rather than spending cuts. So there's a fundamental philosophical difference in how we achieve our fiscal targets. And there's also a difference in our approach regarding debt sustainability. Everybody agrees that a reprofiling of the Greek debt is necessary today. The real question is whether Greece can achieve primary surpluses of 3.5% for the next 15 years. I have my serious doubts that this is a reasonable goal to expect from a country. I don't know of any country that has been able to achieve these types of primary surpluses for such a long period of time. So there are issues where we profoundly disagree with Mr. Tsipras. I also happen to believe that Mr. Tsipras is not a true reformer. So even the reforms which move in the right direction, which are included in the current program, are going to be reforms which will be voted by the parliament, but I expect them not to be implemented simply because Mr. Tsipras does not believe in them.
Now, in the past, the IMF was viewed skeptically in Greece over its handling of previous bailouts, but now we see them emerging as the softest voice among the creditors. Do you agree with that assessment?
Well, I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. The truth is that the IMF has in the past insisted on very tough reforms. Some of them, in my mind, were also completely unjustified. I think where the IMF is probably right is in pointing out that these long-term excessive primary surpluses are unrealistic. Obviously, there is a disagreement between the IMF and the European creditors that needs to be resolved. But I think where the real problem lies is the fact that Greece does not have currently the credibility to convince our creditors that we mean business when we talk about real reforms. The reason being that we have a government which has basically spent 15 months in sort of prolonged negotiations, has spent the first 6 months of its mandate pushing Greece to the brink of a Eurozone exit, has made sort of a U-turn since then, but still has not demonstrated any real commitment to reforms. And that is the big dividing line today in Greece, which I think is also the case in the rest of Europe, is between those who believe in real reforms and those who basically don't want to change anything in the status quo, between the realists and the populists. And Mr. Tsipras is a true populist at heart. That hasn't changed.
And you said Alexis Tsipras is not a true reformer. Then how do you think he's handled the negotiations with Greece's creditors, and what would you do differently if you were in his shoes?
First of all, let me point out that Greece was well on its path to exit the crisis at the end of 2014. At the time, the projections of the European Commission were that the Greek economy would grow 3% in 2015 and 3.5% in 2016. We've had a recession in 2015 and a recession in 2016. We have lost more than 20 billion euros cumulatively in GDP over those 2 years. Now, this is the cost of Mr. Tsipras coming into power. And it's going to take a lot of effort to recover this lost GDP. And frankly, I don't think Mr. Tsipras is the man who can do that. And I think that if we were to also believe the polls, the majority of Greeks also don't believe that Mr. Tsipras is someone who can deliver real growth today.
Now, the other most pressing issue in regards to Greece at the moment is the refugee crisis. Now, you attacked the government recently for dragging its feet. However, 1 in 7 asylum seekers in the EU scheme to relocate refugees throughout the bloc has either refused to be moved or absconded, according to latest figures by the Greek government. Where do things stand now? And again, what would you do differently?
Well, obviously, this is a very complicated situation, and it would be unjust to place the full burden for the refugee crisis on Greece. Having said that, I believe that the government has mishandled the situation on the ground. It has not set up enough camps to allow these people to live in proper and decent conditions. We have makeshift camps on our northern border with the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, where the conditions are completely unacceptable. And now we're in the process of trying to implement a deal with Turkey, which is a very complicated deal. It seems to be working for the moment, in the sense that the refugee flows have significantly decreased, but we don't know whether this is going to change in the future. We've said from the very beginning that you need to make a very clear separation of those refugees who have a reasonable hope to acquire asylum status and the economic migrants who come to Europe for different reasons. And their treatment needs to be very different. And we need to send a clear signal to economic migrants that unfortunately there is no room in Greece for them. And for that matter, I don't think there's any room in Europe for them. The government has completely refused to make that distinction. Hence, a significant number of the people who actually enter Europe through Greece today are not refugees, they're economic migrants.
We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.